Hello, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. After the abject failure of my last mission, where I was trying to put probes in orbit around Jool's moons, I decided to just try and do one at a time this time. And so, yeah, I'm sending a probe and a rover to Pol today. As you can see, I've named the craft wrong. I've named it the Tylo rover and probe, but I'll change that in a minute. And yes, this is post-commentary again at 4 times speed, so you don't have to sit here watching me try out failed designs for hours on end. And yeah, the idea is that I'm going to build a little science rover, with all the sciencey stuff on it, and that will beam up the data to the probe in orbit, and they can send that back to Kerbin. And here I'm just testing the little RCS thrusters on it, because I didn't want to build some elaborate sky crane. The RCS thrusters are good enough on a tiny little moon like Pol. You know, the gravity is just not very strong, and so there's enough thrust and fuel in there to land. And yeah, so I'm just playing around there, and that's basically the final design there. Just a little probe with some solar panels and a little rover. And now I was putting some landing legs on, because if I land on the wheels, there's no one to repair them. So yeah, landing gear. Definitely a necessity at this point. Because it would be quite annoying to spend 200 days getting out to Jool's moons and then just not being able to drive anywhere. So here I'm just testing to see that the landing gear is not lower than the wheels, because that would also be quite embarrassing. And yeah, it's extremely top heavy and wobbly, which is not ideal when I'm going to be driving it on a planet like Pol. So I'll have to be extremely careful when I'm driving it over there so it doesn't do that. So I was just testing how it flips over here, which is not really an ideal test in Kerbin's gravity, because you know, it's obviously way, way higher, but, you know, it was fun. And yeah, the RCS can flip it back over as well, which is nice. And just for fun, I make it explode. And it shatters quite spectacularly into lots of pieces. And so now is the time to build the lifter. And I basically just used the same lifter that I did for the last stack of probes that I built. This is the transfer stage. And yeah, I do make one slight change from the last design that I had. Because, yeah, last time I had a nuclear engine in the middle, and it fell off. So I just used one of those little engines this time. Which isn't quite as efficient, but considering my payload is actually quite a bit lighter this time, and it was okay, I think. Because yeah, those nuclear engines, I mean, they're great, they're extremely efficient, they just go forever, but the structural integrity is far from ideal. I mean, they just fall off all the time. And if you have, like I've got 4 outer engines, if you have 4 engines out there and one in the middle, and there's a decoupler on the middle one, you get that fairing around it. That can actually just knock off the outer engines or the middle one when you decouple. And yeah, I get that kind of stuff all the time with the nuclear engines, so So yeah, they're nice in certain applications, but sometimes you just have to use something else because, yeah, just for the stability of the craft. So now I'm just strapping a bunch of space tape on it because, you know, why build a structural integrity when you can just strap a bunch of struts on it? And yeah, one of those probes that I sent to Jool last time, one of the ones that I failed to get into an orbit around the moon, managed to somehow escape Jool's influence, and is now on a collision course with the sun, which is nice. And yeah, this is the first attempt at a flight. All going swimmingly well. So yeah, this launcher does have a bit too much thrust, but I can't find a way to reduce the thrust while still being able to get off the ground. And yeah, what happened there is one of those white Rockomax tanks just became detached. There is a structural weakness when you stack those tanks up like that. So I just went back and stuck struts between them all, so... But yeah, that happens a lot to me. Like if I put them on the bottom, the thrust from the engines would make them wobble around and come off that way, but if I put them on the top, sometimes they detach, but they stay sort of plastered to the top of it by the thrust, you know. So this is the second attempt, a lot more successful this time. We haven't exploded in the upper atmosphere. And of course there's no Kerbals to worry about killing, so, you know, it's only expensive. We're not losing any lives. Unless there's somebody on that island down there who's just getting crushed by the debris. So yeah, just getting in a nice low parking orbit to save on fuel. Accidentally go past the apoapse there, but it's okay, we managed to get into an orbit anyway. Not exactly circular orbit. We do have to use a little bit of fuel from the transfer stage. But it has buckets of fuel. Just a lot of fuel. So yeah, I've already set up the orbits so that there is a Jool window. And here I just set up my maneuver node and off we go to make the transfer. And yeah, here is the incredibly boring 5-minute burn that it takes to get to other planets. I'm just toasting my face on the engines there. And so, yeah, these poodle engines, they have quite a bit of thrust for the efficiency and weight of them. I do quite like them. I think I prefer them to the nuclear engines, to be honest. I think it's worth sacrificing some of the efficiency for the thrust to weight ratio and the structural stability of them. There we go, I get an encounter first time, and now I just try and get that closer. Try and get it as close as I can so that, you know, it's easier to get captured when you get over there. And there I accidentally detached the wrong engines and had to reload. And there we go. There's the proper engines, the ones that are actually out of fuel. So yeah, just burn up a bit, because Jool is slightly inclined, I think. So every time I go there, I always end up coming in on a polar orbit, which is annoying, but yeah, I'm sure people who are better than me at the game we'll probably get into a nice equatorial orbit. So now I just fast forward through the orbit after a tiny little inclination adjustment. I say tiny, it's 200 meters per second delta V. So yeah, there's a lot of little adjustments on this side of the orbit just to try and get it to not come in right above the pole. I'm basically just burning straight up there, which does use quite a lot of fuel, but it's worth it if you can get into a circular equatorial orbit when you get there. Which of course I don't, because yeah, I'm all the way up there. But I managed to set up a maneuver node on that incredibly eccentric orbit to encounter Pol. So all is not lost. I'm sure if I was on a more equatorial orbit, it would have been a lot easier to get an orbit with Pol, but we get there anyway. So here I am just circularizing around Pol. We're on a crazy inclined orbit, but it doesn't matter, we're just sending a couple of probes. We don't need to worry about that. And yeah, plenty of fuel left. Like, just basically a whole tank left. So yeah, I just decided to use that to land with as well. Or, help to slow down in the landing anyway. You don't want to land on an engine like that. I mean, you can do it, but it's not advised. So there it is, there's Pol, the tiny little chunk of rock. Which is, it is basically a captured asteroid. I mean, after I get the rover on the surface, I see the little reticule of the probe flying around, and it says 65 kilometers, I think, like when it's on the other side of the moon. And so, it's basically about 60 kilometers in diameter, I think. Something like that, anyway. So it's very small. And yeah, here I am, just accidentally burning away from the planet. Yeah, it has very low gravity. So I use this engine after detaching the satellite just to slow my descent. Lower the landing gear before I forget, because I do forget to do that sometimes. And yes, unfortunately I'm landing on a slope here, which is not ideal, but it'll do. I'll watch the tank go down after I decouple it to get the distance. Accidentally raised the landing gear and lowered it again. And yeah, now I just go incredibly slowly. I've got a whole tank of monopropellant to get me down to the surface, so I take it nice and slow all the way down. And there we go. We have landed. Raise the landing gear, take the brakes off, and have a little drive around. And you probably can't tell, but at this point, it was lagging so much. Like, I was getting about 5 frames per second. So I was going to have a nice little drive around and take some scientific readings, but yeah, I couldn't control it. I mean, it takes really fine controls to drive in such low gravity. So I just, nearly flip it again. And yeah, just put the brakes on, switch to the probe in orbit. And yeah, try and see, Pol is tidally locked, so if you can't see Jool from where you landed, you won't see it. So yeah, I switched the probe, and that's it. That's the mission success.